my name is Hunter Chepkis, and this is my off the bench interview featuring the guest of Jim Abbott Strilich, who is a State Farm insurance agent and my personal mentor. To start my interview with Jim, I went into a couple questions I had for him. The first of which were his motivations for starting his State Farm office. The first was, what motivated you to pursue a career as a State Farm insurance agent? He went into depth about how when he was a child, his family was very poor, and the people that he saw that were successful around him that were making money were business owners, and that drew him towards kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to go into until he met his mentor later in life, who was an insurance agent at that time and guided Jim into that realm and taught him what he needed to know to be successful. I also asked Jim, what goals did you set that were not related to financial gain? He did have a few goals. There was some goals related to auto and home production, just regarding to the number of policies, just personal goals that he set for himself. But above and beyond that, he really wanted to put a focus on meeting customer needs was something that was extremely important to him, and having a in-depth conversation with the customer to evaluate their needs and make sure that they have the right coverage for them. He said that this was a key factor in his particular office because it sets him apart from so many other even companies that don't go into this whatsoever. Moving on to the next portion, I asked Jim, what type of sales tactics did you use while you were going through all these years during growth and expansion? And the reason I asked this question was because I think there are a lot of businesses out there that use shady sales tactics to, essentially trick a customer or consumer into buying their product, which is unethical. Jim went into this. He said that during his first years starting, he relied mostly on door to door sales. So a lot of face to face at that time and word of mouth, just traveling around that there was a new State Farm office in town. That is kind of what started to get his office going. From then on, he functioned mostly on asking everyone for referrals. He really focused on providing a quality service to people, and people appreciated that, and they told their friends and family. And he said that that was a key staple to the growth of his business. I personally think this is a very ethical way to do business. There's no shady sales tactics, trying to convince you to do something when, promising things that maybe couldn't be promised. Things of that nature. The next question that I went into with him just was related to customer and owner interest. How does your business balance making a profit with customer needs and well-being? And he said that customer needs and well-being are so important to him and his business that definitely takes the forefront over him essentially making a profit. But he also went into something interesting about they kind of go hand in hand. Most people are undercovered on their insurance and they don't understand anything about their insurance. When they come into our office, when they come into Jim's State Farm office, they get a good conversation about their coverages, and typically they end up increasing them. This in turn ends up with a higher premium that they're paying, which means more money in Jim's pocket. But that was never the focus. The focus was to provide the customer with something that they needed, and that is just a byproduct of that. The next thing I went into was, what is a prominent ethical dilemma that you have faced in the workplace? And I discussed this with him for a while, actually, and he had a very interesting example. He had 3 employees in his office. 2 of them were inappropriately talking about another employee through a work-related chat, work-related private chat to add. The third employee had suspicions about this and logged on to the computer of one of the two employees that they suspected were talking negative about them. They did find negative chats. They reported it to Jim, and we're hoping that Jim would take action on this and hopefully fire the two employees. Um, this is a large ethical dilemma because on one hand you have two employees that spoke negatively about another one and violated company policy actually because of how vulgar their speech was. And on the other hand, you have an employee who thought they were doing the right thing, and by bringing this to the boss, but they actually did violate a policy by looking at that other employee's computer without their knowledge. Jim ended up having to put a lot of thought into this specific situation and ended up letting go all three of the employees after long evaluation. And this was at great detriment to the company because I'm sure you can imagine losing three employees, how much that can affect a small business, especially. How did you navigate employee conflict was something I worked into there. Jim said that typically things aren't as extreme as that situation I just described to you, and you can work it out in a more reasonable means. He mentioned that he typically likes to, if there's a conflict between two people, he'll meet with them individually, kind of get a grasp on what the issue is, and then he'll meet with them together and try to mediate and work something out in order to resolve the conflict. And he said that has been something very successful for him. But like I mentioned in the previous situation, there are some times where the conflict actually cannot be resolved and action needs to be taken. How was rule or policy violation dealt with? That is a perfect example of the situation that he described previously. There was a clear violation of policy there, and the violation of the policy was so severe that it ended up in all three of the employees being terminated. I think that this was the right course of action personally. If you were to maybe violate a less important rule, say, something like you swore on the job, maybe that's something that could be discussed and could be remedied and maybe something that couldn't happen in the future. But when you have something as serious as a situation like this, more drastic action typically needs to be taken, and that's what Jim mentioned. How are promotions and terminations handled is a question I had for him because sometimes people in the workplace feel as if they should be promoted and they're not being promoted, or feel like maybe a fellow employee should not be working the same job as them because of the effort they're putting in. Jim had some really valuable insight on this. As far as promotion goes, he said that typically after a year-end review, he'll set goals with each employee, and at the end of the year, if these employees are meeting the goals or going above and beyond expectation, they will receive a raise and sometimes a promotion if he deems them fit. So he essentially is putting some numbers onto that, so it's not feeling like people are getting promotions and raises based off of nothing or his preference. He makes it very clear that that is what it is connected to. He handles terminations very professionally. He'll just inform them that they're being let go for whatever reason, whether that's lack of performance, possibly, or a company violation of policy, anything of that nature. It's up to Jim's discretion to make that choice, but obviously he always tries to make that in the best interest of the small business. And lastly, I discussed with him how is the privacy of the customer honored. This is a huge ethical issue nowadays. There's a lot of scams that go on. There's a lot of customers that are really worried and concerned about what is my information being used for. And I completely understand that. Working in insurance myself, you have to get a lot of personal information from people, driver's license, social security numbers, payment information. These are all things that could essentially ruin someone's life if they got into the wrong hands. Jim mentioned that all of the company laptops are all locked with extremely, long passwords and fingerprint codes that you need to put in. There are many contractual agreements that employees have to sign while they're being licensed and through State Farm itself. There also are various rules in the office and handbooks that employees have to read before handling certain personal information like this. Personal information is typically preferred to not be written down, according to Jim, but if that is necessary, it will be shredded the same day. So, in that sense, the privacy is very well secured. We will never ask you for anything above what we need, uh, according to Jim. And yeah, that essentially concluded my interview with Jim. It was extremely insightful to listen to him discuss these different things that could cause an ethical issue in a business like this. And I just mentioned him. I really appreciate his time and I enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much.